and minor in psychology. So today I wanted to do like a beginner sort of workshop in Python that I'll be doing for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and basically helping you guys create your own beginner project if you are interested in learning Python and want to keep doing it. This is a great way to jump in. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can do this best. Basically, I have a little presentation that I put together. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. So I put together a presentation, so I'll start there. And then if anyone has a question, please send it in the chat and I'll keep my eye open for it, or you can always hop on audio as well and I'll pause for questions. So let's just start this. Okay, so first of all, what is Python? So Python is a programming language that is often used in scripting roles. So these words you may not be familiar with if you don't know any programming, but that's okay. I'll explain what that means. It's also a very special type of computer science language because it's an interpreted language. Basically, what this means is it goes through your computer and your computer understands it itself and prints out like what you wanted it to do. And so this is very different than some other programming languages, if you're familiar, like C or C++, where you have to tell the computer what you want it to do. Another reason why Python is very popular and used a lot is because it's dynamically typed. What this means is variables that you use don't have to have a certain type, like an integer or characters. You can change them throughout the way. And this often works. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but I'll also go into that. So there's a lot of different types of variables in Python, and another great thing about it is very concise. It's easy to read. Maybe you've seen some code before where it looks like it's a different language, essentially, but Python is very readable. So next, I just wanted to help understand very briefly. It's not super important, but like what exactly a programming language is or a scripting language, because Python is both. So a programming language or program is essentially just a sequence of instructions written so that a computer can perform a certain task. So I put in A plus B and then out comes C, or I put in 2 plus 3 and out comes 5. So that's what a program is. A script, however, is a little bit different. It is a type of programming language, but it's sent from one computer to another. So you can control other softwares. So that's why Python is really useful. So this is just a short explanation on why it was created. It was created by this guy Guido van Rossum. It was named after Monty Python, the movie. Basically, he needed it because he needed a higher level, something that's more complex and would do the job for you, so we didn't have to do the hard work in making our computer understand what the code was. So why Python? So like I was saying earlier, Python is dynamically typed. So you create the variable and then you call it whatever you want, and you can change that along the way. So some other programming languages don't really allow that, like Java, for example. Once you make something a number, you can't change it into like words. So in Python, you are allowed to do that, which is really interesting and has a lot of cool applications. Also, most types of variables are treated the same way, and it's used in several different places. It's used in big tech companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, but it's also used by small businesses when they're trying to make a website or gaming development. They use it a lot, and it's really easy to use and easy to learn. So that's another great thing about it. Does anyone have any questions so far or anything? I don't see any in the chat, so I'm just gonna assume not. So one thing that, oh, I can't, just skipped ahead. So one thing I wanted to do here, so there's two things I want to do. I wanted to present, but I also wanted to code with you. And also it would work best if you did this alongside with me, but you can also watch and do it later. I was gonna leave links that would make it easiest, but I can also just provide instructions on how to do it right now. So the website that I very much enjoy to do Python is called repl.it or replit. It's a really great online editor, so you can always download Python if you just literally Google download Python. But I like this because you don't even need an account to do it. I'm not going to make an account for our purposes, but you can do one easily. It's for free. So when I click start coding, if you're doing this with me, you're just going to go here and select the language. So we're doing Python, and then you can do create REPL. So what this brings you to is, it brings you here, and this is called an integrated development editor. So you basically can write your code and you can see its output. And so you can do this through Replit really easily. So if you're doing with me, great, or if you want to do it later, that's fine as well. So some important things to know about Python when you want to learn it is that its formatting really matters. Just like any language, like English does, you have punctuation, capitalize at the beginning of a sentence, period at the end. Python has these similar rules. So one of these big rules is indentation. If in Python, the indentation really matters in terms of how the computer understands what you mean. And so I'll go into more examples, but I just want you to make sure that you keep this in mind. I see there's something in the chat. If you already have an account, yeah, go ahead and use that. That's perfect. So yeah, okay, and then secondly, you can assign values to variables using a variable name and then the equal sign and then whatever you want to create it to. Rarely or never have to really tell Python what type of variable you want. And then also there are logical operators like this and that or not, and then the function print will really come in handy. So let's start applying those. I know that I've been speaking a lot, but I want to actually show you. So let's practice declaring variables. So what I like about Replit as well is that you can do your code here in main.py, that's the Python file, but you can also do it here on the console, which is where the code comes out. Whatever your output you want it to output, it can come out here. So let's say I say A equals 5. And then I want to know what A is. I can either just write A or I can say print A. So this is how I declared a variable. I set it equal to a number. So A is a number. So when I call A and then press enter, it has the value of 5 in it. Or I can do this function called print in Python with parentheses and an A, and then it gives a 5, what's stored in A. But what's special about Python is, let's say I want to make it a word now. I want to make it my name. So now it stores my name. So that's something that's really cool about Python. You can change what it's setting to. And so a variable in Python just points to a specific memory location where this value is. So first it was pointing to 5, and now it's pointing to my name, Aditi. And so every value in Python has a data type. Oh, sorry. Okay. I thought someone was going to say something. And so there are different types of variable. So when I declared it a 5, a was a 5, that's an integer. So, and then when I changed it, it became a string. So another useful like tool in Python is, let's say I say b equals 1. You can see what the data type of a variable is by doing type. And so it tells you classes, we'll talk about later, but basically it's an int, which is an integer. And so it tells you really useful information. You can redeclare variables as I showed. I changed a from 5 to a to Aditi. And the simplest type really is integers, which I'll discuss more throughout this class. And then there's also a bunch of other ones like strings, tuples, floats, dictionaries, etc., which hopefully over the course of these few weeks we'll discuss and learn how to use them and create functions and games and cool projects. So that was some editor work using Python, but why don't we explore how we can use this Python file? So one way we can test around with things is we can say a equals 1, we can do b equals 2, and then we can print a plus b. So when you use integers in Python, they're like all the mathematical sort of operations are the same as you would write in math. There's plus, there's minus, there's multiply and divide. So if I were to run that, it would return a plus b. You can do minus, it'll give you -1. You can do times. You can do a lot of other complex things with parentheses and a bunch of other things. So that those are some operations that we use with integers. So next I wanted to talk about strings. So strings are just a list of characters and orders. So really anything with words, anything that you would put in quotes or double quotes or single quotes in Python. So as you can see here, double quotes, ABC is the same thing with single quotes. And then there's an important word that comes up here that not everyone may be familiar with. It's called immutable. So strings are immutable. So like I said, not everything can change in Python, but this is a little more specific. So once I declare a string, ABC, I cannot change what's inside that string. So that's what immutable means. And then on the opposite side, there's mutable. So for example, integer is mutable. I can change a, if a was a 4, I can make it a 5. So that doesn't really matter. What you can do is something called concatenating strings. This is like adding them together. And similar to how we were adding integers or any numbers together, you use the plus sign. And so that makes it really easy if you want to combine different words together without, changing the string, because you can't. So one thing you have to be careful is the types have to be the same. So an integer plus a string wouldn't work. So let's just look at that. So like I said, in Python, you never have to say the type. I never have to say int a or string a. I mean, you can, but if you wanted to, it would be like that, str. Python is smart and it guesses for you using like context clues. So we can say a is hi, and then we can say print a, and that would give hi, right? But let's say we wanted to add something else like how are you? We would do a plus sign, and then we could do quotes and say, how are you? And then I think this will show one issue. Yeah, so when you add strings, it adds it very literally, and that doesn't include any spacing. So sometimes you just have to add a little space in between the quotes. And so now you get that. So you can add strings like this. You can also add them like this, where you have two variables that are different strings, and then you add them together like that. But yeah, once again, it doesn't account for spacing. So you can either put a space here, or you can add another space like that. So
Aditi, we can't see the screen.
you can see the screen?
No. The sharing might have been cancelled. We were
No,
able to see.
I can see it.
Let me try again.
Yeah.
We could see.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so yeah, if everyone can see that, I'll just go ahead. Yeah, so strings can be used like that. But notice if I have something like C and I call it 5, and I try to add that in here, you'll get an error. So this one says, so errors are helpful because they tell us where we're doing something wrong and how to fix it. So that's another good thing to learn as in the very beginning. So it says file main Python, line 4. So that takes us to the line where something is going wrong, and then it literally says what it is. And then it says you can only concatenate string, not int to string. So the issue is that you cannot add a string to an integer because those are incompatible types. They don't go together, and it wouldn't make sense because what would a string and an integer combined be? Would it be a string or an integer? So it doesn't work. So those are two very basic types in Python. They have a foundation for a lot of different programs, a lot of different tasks. Does anyone have any questions so far? Or if I'm going too fast, I can re-explain anything like that. No? Okay. So next I wanted to cover functions, and then we can also go into some more data types. So a function is really essential in Python. Functions is a group of related statements that perform a specific task. So they're kind of at what you do. Like so far we've been writing just statements that do things randomly, but a function is very thorough and it has a certain purpose, and you can manipulate it to do different things. So let's say I wanted the user to give me input, then you would use a function, things like that. So basically this is the syntax of a function. You start with this keyword called def, it's short for define, and then you give it a function name, and then in parentheses, you put whatever parameters you need. This will make more sense when I state examples. And then you need a colon, and then also we'll see how indentation plays a really important part here and in developing more complex Python code. So basically, functions, this is an example of one here. It's called greet and a name. Why don't we go through it? So a function, like I said, has a certain purpose and it'll output something specific to what you want it to. So let's start by creating a function called greet, where a parameter essentially is just something that's given in order to make the function happen. So in this greet function, we want the program to print hi, hello, and then your name, good morning. So the name changes depending on who's doing the program. So that's the parameter that we will be using. And then we always put a semicolon here. And so when I enter, Replit does it automatically for you, and most Python editors will. It indents for you because the way Python knows that this is part of the function is because everything inside it will be indented. So if you don't have that indentation, it doesn't know that that's part of the function. So you always have to be careful. And then you can even have double indentations. Like we'll go through that, like depending on what you're writing. But this is simple. So we'll just have it say print, and then we'll say hello, give it that space, and we'll put the name. And then we'll say good morning. Okay, so that's like just a very basic one. I think that, yeah, that's what we did here. And so the next part is understanding how you would run it. So when I press run, you see nothing is coming up there. That's because there's a certain way of calling a function. So I'm just going to skip here and then go back if I need to. Basically, when you want to call a function, you have to either write out the function name and give it that parameter, or you have to write it in the editor. So let me show you how that works. So this function prints hello, good morning, and you have to give it a name, right? So in the code, we could either write this, and now it prints out here. Or I can go here and write it, and it'll do the same thing. So that's cool. There's multiple ways of doing it. Let's practice a different function where we use some integers. So let's say we wanted to create a function for adding. So for adding numbers, you need two numbers at least, right? You need an A plus B. You can't just have one parameter. So in order to have more than one parameter, we would do A comma B, for example. You can have as many parameters as you want that are necessary to do that function. So in this case, we need two. Then in the function, we can do this in a few ways, but you would want to do A plus B, right? That's what the output should be. But in a function in Python, you need a way of returning that output. So there is a keyword called return that makes this really easy. Basically, return statement is used to exit a function and go back to the place from where it was called. So this statement makes you leave the function and prints out this as the output. So now and notice that when I call the function add, let's say 5.3, I don't keep it indented because that would mean add 5.3 is within the function, which doesn't make sense for our purposes. So we always get rid of that indent and we call it. And so now when I run it, oh wait. Oh, wait. Sorry.
Aditi, I did without the parenthesis. It works.
You did? Oh.
Yeah, A plus B without space, without parenthesis.
When you ran it, it printed it there?
Yeah, I did not even print. I just wrote add within parenthesis 5,3 and it works. You have to do the same way how the function is. In your function, there is a space between A and B.
Oh, okay, that's why. Okay, oops, my bad. Okay. Okay, so I'm not sure why the the return isn't working, but I'll look into that because I know that return statements are used often in Python, and I use those a lot. We can even do that now. But yeah, so that's just one way, another way of using it, using integers. Does anyone have any questions or anything? No. Okay, so okay, so some other ways that we can use this is we can start making some more complex functions. So you can start asking the users for input. I'm just gonna check on that real fast because I don't want to mess that up. But basically, Python user input. And there are a lot of websites online that are very helpful in learning Python. And so, okay, this is input. It's just input. Okay, so let's say you wanted the user, so the person typing in this console over here, to do to give you a number that you need to add. We can create a new type of add where basically we first ask, enter a number to add, and then oh, okay, we would call this A and then make it the input. So that's like an input and then a prompt. So the user themselves has to give the number that you want to use. Also, another note, the squiggly lines often mean something like the red one means there's something wrong, and then the other color, in this case it's green, sometimes it's yellow, just means like they're just giving you a little warning. It may not mean anything. Here it's saying that A is assigned to but never used, but like eventually we'll use it, so it doesn't matter. So B can also be an input, enter another number. And then we can print A. We can also do, what you can do in functions is you can set another variable to its output if you didn't want to write A plus B in here. And then you would just print C. And so now let's call and see how that works given user input. So we would call add. Oh no, actually it would make more sense to just run it here. Oh wait, add. Okay, let's just do that. So we enter a number. Okay, interesting. So I made an error. Basically, when you use input, you're automatically, Python thinks it's a string. So what happened here is I added two strings together and it concatenated them. So instead of printing 8, it was printing 5 plus 5, 3 together, which is 53. We can check how to do as an integer. Does anyone have any other questions or anything that I should go over?
Aditi, if I say print C, it gives me an error. It says invalid syntax. But if I use return C, I get the same 53.
Do you have exactly this and it says error?
If I use print C, it says invalid syntax.
Mm-hmm.
If I use return C, it gives me the same 53.
Okay, yeah. So that's probably because it's not necessary to do that line, and then it's because you're trying to exit out of the function, and the invalid syntax, I'm not sure, but
Yeah. So I think so. We are passing the parameters, right? So, so we have to make some generic parameters. That means something. There are some options called some K. I don't remember, some K word, something like that. These are like generic parameters where the user is supposed to input. So definition of add, then the empty braces should give an option for user to input. What should be the enter a, something like that. So I'm just looking at it actually. So it's but it's interesting actually. So let me give me a minute.
well, I know that I can also convert a to an integer here, or I can declare it here. This might give an error though, but yeah, okay. So but yeah, maybe we can go back to that later, but for now, I thought like a few other challenges that were good and for learning Python that we can go through now using just what we've learned so far, and then also feel free to do on your own. One website that I think is really great is Concatenating, if you've used before. It walks you through Python. The version that we've been using is Python 3, which is a newer version. But unfortunately in Concatenating you have to pay for Python 3, but you can do Python 2, which is similar enough. Additionally, there's a website called Trinket that we can look at now. For strings, I really liked what they had. If you want to learn more string functions on how to manipulate strings, and I can drop these links also in the chat. I'll just do that now. And I can do it on. Yeah, so Trinket's another website where we have like an online editor, but it also has some specific challenges, as you can see here. You can also look ahead into different types like tuples, dictionaries, other things like that. Is someone's mic? Is someone's mic on? I can mute them.
I'll check and mute 1 second.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. Okay, so here we can do a few challenges using strings. So the first one that they're showing us here, and everything is interactive here, so I can type in here whatever I want to, which I really like. So here they're talking about two functions called lower and upper. Lower is changing everything into lowercase, and upper is changing everything to uppercase. So if I start with everything uppercase and lower it, it does that. Oh, and another thing to notice here is that this is called a method. And so basically the way a method is something that's built in to the type. So here it's built into strings. So if I tried to do like 5.lower, oh, it's not thank you. 5.lower, where 5 is an integer, it wouldn't work, you see. So it's bad input because that's not the type that it's meant for. And so we can do this for any other string, upper or lower. So that's the first thing that they wanted to do. And so here they're asking you basically to make, I'm pretty sure. So it says make a function lowercase. Given a string, returns the string except all in lowercase. So if you do lowercase arg, it would change it to arg. Lowercase trinket, trinket with lowercase. So here they want you to add the code, and then here is the testing. And so, okay, so here they're returning it, and it has to be basically the parameter that you gave it in. Maybe that's also why it wasn't working earlier. But okay, so let's work through this. So you're given something, a string, which is obviously a string in this case, and you want it to lowercase. So the first thing I think that you have to do is, let's just go through each letter. Oh, I guess then it would make sense to talk about for loops. Sorry, let me just go back. Are you guys familiar with loops in Python?
I know for loop in general, C, C++.
Okay. Okay, well, I think this will help. I realize that the challenges are also going to require a lot of other knowledge just besides strings. So let's just talk about loops first. So there's different types of loops in Python. There are while loops and for loops. Those are two main important ones. So while loops, basically, as it says, they do what's inside the loop while it's true, while the condition is true. So in this case, they made age equal to 10, and then while age is less than 20, you print the age and you increase it. And so we can also create some of our own. So let's say a is equal to 1, and then we're trying to print out all the numbers like 1 through 10. So we'd say while a is less than, and so we can also use these operators, less than, greater than, less than, or equal to, while a is less than 10. And then again, we use the colon because this is, it's like a while loop is like kind of like a function in which you want everything indented under it to occur while the while loop is going on. And so inside, we would say print a, and then we would want to increment a. So increment is just like increase its value. In this case, we would make it 1 greater. And then we can run this and see what happens. So as you see, it prints 1 through 9. And so the reason why it's 9 and not 10 is because basically it printed 1, and then it changed a to 1 plus 1, which is 2. And then it checked again, is 2 less than 10? And it is. So it printed 2, and then it incremented it. But once we got to 9, it printed 9, and then it changed a to 10, and that's 10 is not less than 10. So in this case, if I wanted to print 10, I would just have to change it to less than or equal to. Another way of incrementing in Python is just to write plus plus after. This does, oh wait, what was that? Not in Python. That might be my confusion because I just studied C++. My bad. A plus, okay. A plus equals when you want to do it in Python. And then that works the same way. Okay, so that's like the basic of a while loop. And so something to understand also about coding in general and Python is what's called a Boolean expression. And a Boolean expression is essentially something that comes out to be true or comes out to be false. And so this is really important in while loops because whatever comes right after the while, as long as it's true, everything inside the while will happen. And so that's like a Boolean expression right there. So a true or false expression. And so another way that we can make things happen is just by using the words true or false themselves. So here they tried while false, I'm not going to print. No, really, nothing's going to print. And so if you run it, like nothing will happen. Whereas here, while true, it will print. And so let's see some challenges here. Perhaps we can do those. Oh, it's spoiling. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wonder how to make this bigger. Okay, there you go. How do I make this? Okay, this will just have to work for now. Okay, so in this one, they set x equal to 0 and said while x is less than 100, print x, and then x equals x plus 10. Does anyone want to guess, like, what would this do?
0 to it'll display 0 to 90, counter by 10, like 10, 20, 30, 40.
Yeah.
Up
So
to 90.
if we run that, that's exactly what it does. But yeah, it does not print 100 because it's less than 100. So once it reaches 90, it prints 90 and then it increments it to 100 and it checks this true or false expression and it's no longer true. So it has to exit out of that loop. So does anyone know what would happen in this one? Basically, it wouldn't do anything because it's while false. So this is never true, in which case it will never go into that loop. This one, I think, I don't know why, but whatever they gave it is an error. I think because you can't do minus minus like I was trying to do that. But that's basically what they meant. X equals x minus 1, where you're subtracting each time. Oh, and x is not defined. They didn't define x. So let's just call x is equal to, while 3 is, let's make x 5. So do you guys have any guess to what it would do now? We started with x equal to 5, and then we said while 3 is less than x, we print x and then subtract 1 away from x. So what would it print in that case?
4.
5, 4.
Yeah, so it'll print 5 and then 4. So it printed 5 first because 3 is less than 5, and then it subtracted, became 4, 3 is less than 4, printed 4. Then it became 3, and 3 is not less than 3, so then it finished. So that's the basics on while loops. While that will really help for those other challenges and any other challenges on this website that are really helpful if you want to learn more about functions and strings. So next, finally, I'll cover about loops, for loops, not about loops. So for loops basically are for a specific value or for specific values or data types. So like this says, they're really helpful when you want to do a bunch of things at the same time. So here, you're printing a bunch of things. You have to use 6 lines, right, just to print 0 through 5. And so when you work on really big projects, that becomes very time consuming and basically a waste of time. So let's say you put it in a for loop. And this also introduces us to lists. Basically, lists are just an assortment of values of the same type. So here, they're all integers. So you can call them just by using this square bracket, and you just write however many you want. And we can talk more about lists next time. We'll just look at how it works in here. And so the way we call a for loop is basically we say for blank in blank. And so the first blank is sort of like a parameter in how in a function we put define the function name and then we gave it a parameter. Instead of writing it in parentheses here, we just call it what it is. So we say n, and n in numbers. So the list is numbers, and by saying n in numbers, we're basically calling like each element. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it'll go through each element and print it. And so that saves a lot of time and energy, especially with really big things. And you see how here it prints out 0, 1, 2, 3, or 5. So again, it's explaining how this is like it for the loop. It's like converting it into English. It says look at the list and then grab each element of it. And so in for loops, there's also a really helpful function that we can use that'll be really helpful for also what I plan on us doing later on. It's called range. And so range is specifically for numbers. It'll give you back numbers within that range. So in here where we had to call an actual list and make it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead we can save another line and just say 0 through 6. And so the range function it starts inclusive, so it includes 0 and it excludes the last number, so it excludes 6. So that's why it prints the same thing as the above function. And so this is just explaining the general form of a for loop. Yeah, basically a temporary variable or something that, or basically like element. And so this, oh, I don't know why they spoil it. Okay, so in here, we have an example of a for loop. And so it starts with sum being 0, and then it says for x in range 0 through 101, sum equals sum plus x. So does anyone have any, oh, it basically says, it says that this for loop sums the numbers between 0 and 100. And we can understand this because basically x is going through 0 to 100, not 101 because it stops there. And it's making sum equal to what sum was previously and adding on x. So when x is 0, it's 0 plus 0, so this stays 0. But then x increments and becomes 1, and then it'll become 0 plus 0, which is what sum used to be, plus 1, and now sum is 1. And then it continues and continues, and I think when it runs, yeah. So that's the sum of all numbers, like if you were to do 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way to 100. Let's clear that one and then not read what it says. This starts with something called factorial. If you're familiar, it's basically just like if I were to do 10 factorial, which is like 10 exclamation point, it multiplies all the numbers from 10 to 1. So 10 times 9 times 8, whatever. So this starts with factorial equals 1, and then for x in range from 1 to 11. So it's not including 11, it's going up till 10. It's saying factorial equals factorial times x. So if anyone wants to guess what it's doing, I think, yeah, I pretty much gave it away. But it's basically doing 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 all the way down to 1, and changing what factorial is each time. And so that's yeah, it multiplies. So that's another cool thing about Python is it might seem weird that we're setting factorial, 2 factorial, like itself, times another number, but you can always manipulate values in Python and set them equal, like how earlier we were saying a equals a plus 1. We can use what it used to be to make something new, but what you have to remember is that this is the new value of factorial, and what was used on the right side no longer exists after it does. So this is like this is that new value, and then this is the assignment, what you assigned it to.
Aditi,
Yeah.
is factorial a built-in method or built-in function in this case?
No, it's not. They just called it that. We can call it fact or anything. They just use that
But
word.
like add is a built-in function. Is there anything like that for factorial? Is there any built-in methods or built-in functions for this?
So I don't think so. But
Yeah,
oh,
there are
well,
some
actually
packages
there are.
available. Yeah.
I think. Well, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are some packages, like I think she will
Math.
talk maybe like in the subsequent. There are some libraries called Pandas, NumPy, so you could use that. But here
Yeah.
she's coding explicitly. So it's,
Also, it's a library. It's not a function or method.
yeah, so
Yeah,
library is
so-
actually the function itself. Yeah.
So if
Sorry.
we
So
from the library, how do we do? Okay, that we will teach later.
yeah, I just meant to say, like, you can't do like in mathematics you would write that symbol, right? That doesn't work. But there are definitely libraries, like there's a math library that you can import. We can talk about importing libraries as well later, that have functions where I think it's something like you would, you can call like factorial on a number. And also, I don't know, Replit might have libraries already imported. But yeah, that's for, I guess, a little later, if that helps.
Aditi, couple of questions.
Yeah.
So, like, did you cover, like, we have around more than 500 languages. Why Python stands out? That's my one question. Second question, which of the leading industry uses this programming language heavily? Because,
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think when the market turns around, people might look for jobs. This might help them out to brush this language. So if you can just cover a little bit there.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mentioned it briefly, but I can go into it more. Let me just see what someone said. Oh, I'll answer it. Okay, so yeah, Python is very accessible, and it's used in a lot of different things. One thing that's really popular is like gaming, so video games, online games, a lot of those, that coding, the back end coding, not like the visual part, but like if I touch the goal, then I score a point. That kind of stuff is done in Python. But it's also used by a lot of tech industry, tech companies like Google, Wikipedia. Actually, the founder used to work at Google, so they use it a lot. Yahoo, NASA, even. And so it's very useful in tech companies because it's so versatile. But like I mentioned, it's that scripting language, which is like you can have it go from one computer and one software to another software, which means it's also used in like web applications and web development, like website creation. So that makes it really flexible. Does that answer your question?
Sure. I think just to add to that, the mainly used for data analysis, right?
Yeah.
All the finance companies uses this because
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
for data analysis. Even Shukumar's company is one of the heavily used company for this. Once again, thanks for the answer.
Yeah, no worries. Does anyone have any other questions? I see that there's a question about OR, and also we have just a few minutes left. So I can take any other questions. For logical operators like and, or, and all the other ones, we can definitely, I can go into that next time, just because that'll also take a little chunk of time. If not, then I would definitely recommend taking a look at these challenges. So the link that I sent, as well as it's not just like under challenges in Python, there's not just strings, they also have other things. Yeah, so they have string challenges. They have something called turtle challenges, which I sent a link to, which is really cute. I think you can basically see how Python is used visually, as well as just like the output that we've been seeing. This might not load because my computer is really slow. But yeah, I sent the links to those. So yeah, does anyone have any other questions or? Yeah, that is a good point. In Python 3, you need parentheses for print, but if you are to do Python 2 through Codecademy, they actually highlight the fact that Python 3 is a little bit different than Python 2, and that you wouldn't need parentheses. But if you choose to do that, they'll definitely explain that. Yeah, I think that's the most recent version, 3.7.
So Aditi, I have a question. So why would you think that Python would be like most, acceptable across all age groups? So why would you think? Is it like easy because of the interface? You mentioned a couple of points which are interesting.
Uh-huh.
So one is like, there's a general purpose. So would you like to add like anything from your experience?
Yeah, so there's like different like levels of coding, like higher level languages versus low level languages. And I've done things like Python, which is considered higher level, versus like C, which is considered low level programming. And I think it is better to start at a higher level, whether it be something like Java or Python. The only reason why I think Python is the best in terms of learning purposes is that it is very readable, and they do like the computer does a lot of work for you. You don't need to declare a type, and you don't need to worry about those type of things. A lot of students learn R. I haven't learned R personally. I know a lot of people who have. I heard that it's very much used in like data and science, like biology, sort of data analysis and things like that. And I'm not very heavily involved in those aspects of computer science, so I haven't learned that. I heard it's not too difficult though to learn.
Yeah, another point I would like to add is why Python is more popular, because it caters to all categories. So from the data analytics to even for the developer, they use for the backend and even for the visualization. So, and what is another appealing is like it's open source, right? So anyone can contribute. So that makes it more attractive. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's all very very open source, and you can use it for front end and back end, which I think is nice and makes it very flexible as well.
Aditi, will you be teaching more on turtles in the next few classes?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Honestly, it's been a little bit time since I did the turtle challenge specifically, but my goals were to go through, a list, what a tuple is, dictionaries, and then ultimately have you guys create your own project that combines all of the things that we've
That would be interesting.
learning about. Yeah.
before we conclude, do you have any homework for anybody to just to do prep for next week?
Yeah, so I think it would be great if, like I mentioned, in Trinket, this is the home page, and then when you go to learn, you can, I think making an account would make it easier, but basically all these challenges here are specifically with strings. That can be like these first few can be really helpful. Additionally, the turtle challenge. And then if any questions come up, these tutorials can help. So like I know that in the reverse challenge, you have to use slicing, which is like taking a section of a string, which we didn't get to cover, but that would definitely be in the string tutorial here. So yeah, that would be really good. And then another thing would be Codecademy is a really great website.